In the opening of the story, an angel recounts that one day she heard from a person that she should learn more about humans, and this leaves her very insecure because she doesn't even know how to greet them properly. However, above the insecurity, tremendous curiosity leads the angel to the heart of one of the cities of men, where she believes she will live fantastic experiences. Meanwhile, leaving his shift at the fancy restaurant, Tokumitsu is exhausted due to the long shift he just finished. On his way home, he encounters a kitten he had adopted as a child, but since he couldn't keep it, a cat-loving neighbor ended up taking the animal. It seems too late to think about it, but currently, he could take care of this kitten after all, as it has been a month since he started high school and moved out on his own. His apartment is not the epitome of tidiness, but one day he will put everything in order. At this moment, all he wants is not to feel so alone all the time. Until suddenly, a feather of angelic wing invades his house through the window. The next day, the alarm clock wakes Tokumitsu, and his body feels so heavy that he's sure he caught a cold. During breakfast, he notices that the window slept open, although he always closes it every night, but soon he realizes the reason for all this: an unknown girl sleeping on his balcony. The young man panics and ends up spilling his milk on her, who, after saying good morning to the homeowner as if she had been living there for years, decides to change her wet clothes. Meanwhile, Tokumitsu wonders if this person might be an otaku cosplayer who practices parkour in her spare time, or if this could be some new internet prank, so he closes all the curtains to prevent the cameras from filming the apartment. In the meantime, the girl asks for some borrowed clothes, and Tokumitsu rummages through his drawers like crazy in search of a shirt. After finding the only clean blouse, he apologizes for it not being anything more refined, but it's the girl who apologizes for having used the boy's balcony without permission, as she had nowhere else to sleep. Then she introduces herself as Tawa, while he says his name is Tokumitsu Shintaro. Then the girl uses the boy's first name Shintaro to express her happiness at having met a person with such a pure heart, and that this can only be the work of God. With this, the boy begins to appreciate the politeness and beauty of the stranger, who would love to thank all of Shintaro's family members. However, he tells her that he lives alone, and Tawa is impressed that he lives alone in this mansion with so many windows. Facing this, Shintaro has to explain that this room is his entire house, not the entire building. With so many things scattered around, Tawa thought the apartment was a storage room, and this disconnected thought of the girl makes the homeowner think there's something wrong with her. Besides, he questions why she was sleeping on the balcony, and without answering the question, the girl remembers that she needs to repay the hospitality somehow, so she asks the boy to tell her without fear what she can give in return. As she was too close and insisting that she will do everything in her power, Shintaro loses his temper and says that there's nothing he wants, so Tawa laments and promises to at least cook something for the host, but there are no ingredients in the house because the guide only eats frozen food with Coca-Cola. Since that's the case, the girl decides to contribute with some cleaning, but as she rushes to the balcony, she ends up tripping over a pile of very suspicious magazines. Fortunately, she didn't see what happened because she was busy separating a cat fight to fulfill the verse, "Love your neighbor as yourself." After that, Shintaro puts some band-aids on the girl's scratched fingers and tells her to chill, because these cats sometimes fight but live rubbing against each other on the neighborhood rooftops. Seeing the purity of the girl, Shintaro understands that she might have reasons to run away from home, but reminds her that it's dangerous for a girl to sleep outdoors, so she needs to consider going back home. However, Tawa explains that she lives in heaven, God's abode, and that she is an angel. Shintaro finds it amusing to hear what he just heard, but soon he realizes that the girl is serious, so he is taken aback while Tawa tells him that she came down to earth by God's order and represents the angels on a mission to learn about humans. In the midst of this speech, Shintaro really saw that she was serious, but that doesn't mean he believes it, because in his mind, clearly Tawa escaped from some asylum or is one of those pretty, made-up girls who keep pushing some generic computer course. Finally, the strange girl asks to spend a few days at the boy's house, but as the alarm clock alerted that there's half an hour left for work, Shintaro rushes to get her out, at least promising to accompany her to the bus stop. After all the confusion, Shintaro takes a deep breath and believes he made the best decision. In the late afternoon, the boy was exhausted because of the worsening cold, and so the boss let him leave work early. On his way home, he wonders if Tawa really went back home, certain that he would never see her again, until she passes by Shintaro in the company of a weird old man who invited her to go to a hotel. Faced with the situation, he grabs Tawa by the wrist and pulls her away. But when it's time to lecture the angel about not trusting strangers, the boy falls flat on the ground and faints. Sometime later, Shintaro wakes up in his house, and Tawa was so worried by his side that she even shed tears of relief upon hearing from the boy that he's better. Shintaro looks around and realizes that the girl had spent all this time taking care of him, and speaking of which, she offers him milk and shiro porridge made with the leftover bread as she didn't find rice in the house. Shintaro is happy to eat something he's never eaten before, but at the same time feels embarrassed when Tawa insists on feeding him. In the end, he gives in and feels good to be eating something so delicious made by someone who cared so much to take care of him. After relishing every second of this unique moment, Shintaro resumes his motherly sermon, which he stopped giving in the street, warning Tawa not to trust strangers because there are many bad people in the world. The angel tries to justify her action in following that man but ends up not finding the right words, so Shintaro breaks the silence by offering her his home to stay for a few days since Tawa really has nowhere else to go. With the good news, the girl hugs Shintaro tightly, who knows that this girl is a bit crazy and absent-minded but still a good girl. At least he thinks so. Next, the homeowner comments that it must have been difficult to carry him there, but Tawa replies that it was the easiest thing in the world, considering she can fly. So as the boy makes that same incredulous face again, this time she spreads her angelic wings so that there is no doubt left about who she really is, and Shintaro is enchanted by the beauty of that unique scene. However, as he wakes up the next day, the young man is certain that it was just a dream until the angel wakes up next to him and throws all his certainty down the drain again. Shintaro asks what she's doing in his bed, but as the girl reminds him it's the only bed in the apartment. Seeing that he has indeed taken an angel to raise, Shintaro sees her dress slowly slipping off her shoulder, so he hurries to tell her to change clothes to go buy coffee on the street. Arriving at the corner store, he's eyeing some rice to buy, while Tawa shares a steamed bun that comes as a bonus dish for those who collect some stickers from the packaging. With excitement, the angel ends up exposing her wings outside, so Shintaro needs to put her back on track to avoid causing chaos inside the grocery store. Upon returning home, she apologizes for the untimely excitement and explains that she learned to keep her wings inside while on Earth because she read the Guide to Earth Life for Good Kids. Interested in the subject, the human asks what angels actually do in life, so Tawa explains that they convey God's will to people and take care of souls so they don't get lost between heaven and earth. Shintaro thinks that's a tough job because there are plenty of people in this world, while Tawa concludes by saying that bringing happiness to humans is also an angelic service. However, when the guy asks what angels do to generate this happiness, Tawa realizes she hasn't found out yet, but she presumes that God sent her to find out. Soon, Tawa takes a bite of the steamed bun she brought and promises to eat it every day she can. But Shintaro knows that buying it every day at the neighborhood corner store will drain the money his parents give him every month, so he decides he'll have to start cooking from now on. Therefore, he invites Tawa to buy the ingredients as well as the things she needs for everyday life, like a toothbrush, and once again the angel lets her wings out and shows that she's still going to be a handful on the street. Before they leave, Tawa puts her hand on Shintaro's forehead to see if the fever has improved, and once again he can't control his embarrassment, hastily saying that it was probably just exhaustion fever. As they arrive at the mall, the angel believes it's actually a palace and runs ahead out of pure excitement. Shintaro follows behind the new guest and tries to keep her close to buy the things she needs, and the girl offers to float the shopping basket in case it gets too heavy, considering her wings have to stay out for that. After refusing the offer, obviously, Shintaro puts some chopsticks in the basket, while Tawa seems interested in a kitten mug she found, but since the homeowner already has enough cups, she's too embarrassed to ask. Around them, people are enchanted by Tawa's princess-like appearance, so Shintaro decides to go buy some clothes to attract less attention. Upon entering the store, the boy is relieved to have money to buy a blouse or two, since he saved up from the work he's been doing. So he insists that Tawa take a look around and try on all the models she finds most interesting. A saleswoman offers a new collection to the angel, and she gets excited picking out the pieces she wants to try. When Tawa enters the fitting room, the saleswoman comments that Shintaro's girlfriend is very beautiful, but he makes sure to explain that it's not what she's thinking. In the midst of this, as she changes, Tawa reflects that Shintaro took her in even though he doesn't know her deeper, so she thinks of something to repay all that kindness and goodness, since she said earlier that bringing happiness is her function. Thus, she steps out of the fitting room with one of the outfits, takes the boy's hand, and promises to make him happy, making everyone around think it's a marriage proposal. On their way out of the store, Shintaro is relieved that he didn't feel so embarrassed about this public declaration until Tawa asks him what he thought of her new outfit. Inside, he was saying how beautiful she looked, but on the outside, he could only say that it suited her. Then they buy the food and return home. Upon arrival, Shintaro is tired and assumes that the angel must be too, especially since today is Sunday and the mall was crowded, but Tawa replies that she had a lot of fun because Shintaro was by her side. Moreover, Tawa finds among the purchases the kitten mug she wanted so much, and with that, they both become embarrassed at the same time in the face of this moment of affection, and Shintaro thinks to himself that he also had a lot of fun with this mysterious angel. As night falls, Shintaro shares the bed with Tawa again and remembers that he shouldn't have bought another bed as well. 2 days before reaching this moment, the innocent Tawa arrived on Earth and was enchanted by the lights scattered throughout the city. She sees a train just below her flight and goes after it to get to know this incredible machine up close and observe the people inside. Falling in love at first sight with the planet of humans, she goes to a place full of lights to reflect on how she should approach humans. Remembering the manual she read before traveling to Earth, a passage said that when an angel descends to Earth, they should remain in a position higher than that of humans and emit a powerful glow, introducing themselves in a grandiose manner. Alternatively, they can also hide their wings to avoid drawing attention and be more discreet. Since Tawa wants to get to know humans up close, she chooses to hide her wings to avoid risks. Looking down at the bustling crowd below, she realizes how busy these people seem, and feeling tired, Tawa quickly looks for a place to spend the night. Wandering through the city streets at night, she has no idea where she can rest, but since she doesn't have the option to go back home at this point, the angel needs to decide quickly. So seeing a building that she thought was a gigantic mansion, Tawa approaches one of the floors and lies down on the balcony, thinking it's a vacant room and that she won't bother anyone with her presence. As she settles in, she wonders if this planet really has a place for her, but she intends to reconsider this thought only after resting for a bit. At least she has the feeling she will meet someone wonderful. Then we see the angel telling Shintaro how she ended up sleeping on his balcony. Shintaro is happy that she found a place to stay, and in turn, the angel is happy to have landed right in the room of her new friend whom she already likes so much. This moment happened shortly before the end of the first episode, where they were having dinner after returning from shopping, and Tawa prepared an incredible feast for dinner. Shintaro was loving being pampered, but this time he refuses to be fed, so he enjoys the food, especially a potato he hadn't tried before and loved, while asking where Tawa learned to cook like this. She explains that she also learned from the Guide to Life on Earth for Good Children, and the boy realizes that this book really must have everything. Excited about the meal, he drifts off thinking about fresh rice and succulent stew, bidding farewell to his days of frozen food and welcoming his new life alongside Tawa. At this moment, Shintaro remembers that Tawa promised to make him happy, its kind, beautiful angel, and an excellent cook. Lost in thought about the girl, Shintaro takes a break from eating, and Tawa asks if he didn't like it, but in reality, he was thinking about what he could do to repay all this kindness from the angel. Tawa thinks that being able to sleep there is enough, but since he mentioned help, she asks him to explain after dinner how to use the bathroom. So Shintaro teaches her that to take a bath, she must close the curtain to avoid wetting the basin and other things outside. Then she has to turn a knob to get hot water and another to adjust the temperature, but she must always remember to fill the tub first if she wants to use it, and also use the stopper to close the drain and keep the water inside. After the lesson on how to use the bathtub, Shintaro is happy to help, but the fact that such a girl is taking a bath there makes him very nervous, so he wakes up to life and goes to watch TV instead of sitting at the bathroom door. He turns on the television and tries to watch anything, but his imagination keeps taking him back to Tawa's bath. So he tries to punish himself with several self-right hooks, but soon discovers that he won't be able to fight against this emotional turmoil he got into. Still, without giving up, he turns off the TV and decides to study for tomorrow's English test, and this time he manages to focus for a good while until he feels the need to go to the bathroom. Distracted, he opens the door and realizes he had forgotten that the bathroom was still occupied, so there was the girl undressed in front of him. He closes the door in embarrassment and apologizes for not remembering that she was in there, while cursing the all-in-one Japanese bathrooms that combine bathtub with toilet. Tawa says she can close the curtain and wait for him to use the toilet, but the surprise takes away his desire to use the bathroom. Sometime later, he finally manages to use the bathtub and reflects that when you live alone, you don't have to worry if there's someone on the other side of the door, so he invaded the bathroom by instinct earlier. But Tawa also doesn't seem to worry much about these things because soon she's in there again offering to wash the boy's back, driving him crazy. Moreover, there's only one bed and the two sleep close to each other, and Shintaro can't sleep because of it. For this reason, he decides that the priority is to buy another bed tomorrow. When morning comes, the boy hadn't managed to sleep a wink, but since it was not even 6 in the morning yet, he decides to go to the bathroom and try to get some rest. However, once again, Tawa was stuck inside the bathroom, this time changing clothes, and Shintaro doesn't know where to hide his face after another blunder of this level. Because of this, the boy's sleep disappears altogether because he can only think about the nonsense of seeing her in the bathroom twice and how it could happen again. He thinks about establishing rules to avoid this. First, he thinks about leaving the bathroom door open when no one is using it. Tawa comes in to brush her teeth and comes face to face with Shintaro, turning on the churros machine. Despite that, not everything was just secondhand embarrassment, and Shintaro's third day of life with an angel continued to be blessed with a lovely breakfast, even though poor Shintaro was dead tired. Anyway, he fills his stomach with satisfaction and thanks his roommate for the treat, and when the Good Morning Mofu show starts on TV, Shintaro knows he needs to go to school. Tao didn't know he was studying, so he explains that he's in his first year of high school. Hence, she promises to get ready now to leave together. Shintaro says she doesn't have to go to school with him because people would find it odd, but Tawa believes she can't make the young man happy if she's not always close to him. Shintaro insists it won't work, so the angel asks him to skip class. But he says seriously that a student's duty is to study, and this time the girl gives up on insisting. Soon, the homeowner leaves some money for her just in case and asks Tawa to watch TV and relax until he returns in the evening. On the way to school, Shintaro feels a little sorry for Tawa, but there really was no way to take her along. Besides, he didn't even sleep last night and feels like he's going to vomit from being so full. Surprisingly, his friend Shuchi slaps him on the back, and the boy complains that he could have let everything out in that play, but his friend has no idea what he's talking about. At that moment, Sumyuji arrives scolding Shuchi for being rude and blames him for Shintaro looking like he got hit by a train. Shuchi analyzes the poor boy's pale face and asks if he's possessed, and Shintaro indeed considers himself possessed by an angel. Anyway, he tells the truth that he can't sleep, and Sumyuji gets worried, especially since her friend lives alone. Shuchi thinks she's showing a bit too much concern. The girl gets embarrassed and says she only cares about her friend, so Shuchi asks her to show that affection to him as he's a good boy. Shintaro laughs at his childhood friends and says they look more like a comedy couple, so Tsunevi tells him never to repeat that nonsense again, leaving Shuchi offended by her exaggerated reaction. Meanwhile, Tawa is struggling with the blanket as she tries to hang it out to dry and still manages to keep the entire house incredibly clean, but she can't help but think about Shintaro, how happy he was to see him eating so much at breakfast, and she wishes he would come back soon. By the way, she doesn't know what he's going to eat for lunch, since he said he'll only be back in the evening. So Tawa imagines him starving on the floor like a homeless person and panics. Back at school, indeed, Shintaro will only have juice for lunch, but because he filled himself up at breakfast and can't even handle another olive. Suyuji is worried about her friend's diet because he can't cook and only eats bread for every meal, and that's why Shintaro almost lets slip that Tawa is making food for him, but manages to shut his mouth before saying her name and quickly adds that every day he eats well at the restaurant where he works. Still, Sumyuji knows he doesn't have work every day, so she offers to make lunch for a friend. Shintaro notices the well-made food that the girl prepared and compliments her talent, and the girl shyly says that making an extra lunch is no trouble at all. Shuchi asks if there's some of that grub for him too, but the girl snaps that starting from the third lunchbox, it starts to become a hassle. Shintaro finds the unusual conversation of the two amusing, but soon panics when he sees Toa flying out of the cafeteria window. He tries to hide the angel at all costs and tells her to go to the rooftop, that he rushes up pretending he forgot about an important appointment. Shuchi imagines he's gone to meet some girl, so Tsumevi teaches her friend a lesson for saying what he shouldn't. Seeing an angel flying around the school, a group of boys starts to think they've been playing too many video games, and when Shintaro is climbing the stairs to find Tawa, an unknown blonde notices his presence. Upon finding the angel, he remembers asking her not to come and comments on her exposed wings, so he starts to imagine news reports all over Japan confirming that angels really exist. Tawa apologizes and explains that she was just worried about what her friend would eat this afternoon, so she leaves the food on the ground and turns to leave. But Shintaro feels bad for speaking to her like that and calls his friend to eat with him, leaving the girl extremely happy. Soon they thank the heavens for the meal and get to work, and Shintaro praises the food while reflecting that Tawa probably hasn't been discovered, otherwise it would have definitely caused a massive uproar. Next, he notices that she made the potato he loved again last night, and Tawa replies that she wants to learn more about the things he likes so she can make more food. Shintaro asks her not to overdo it with these banquets, and while the two laugh together, Shintaro thinks that maybe he really was possessed by an angel, but that doesn't seem so bad after all. The next day, when Shintaro returns from school, Tawa greets him happily, while the boy apologizes for the lunchbox incident. On the other hand, the angel reminds him not to go flying around, so the two end up making amends right there. Shintaro notices that Tawa washed his clothes, even though she didn't know how to use the washing machine, but as always, the girl had learned by reading the Good Children's Guide to Life on Earth. He becomes increasingly impressed with this so-called guide, until he sees that the girl washed his underwear too. Since he was a kid, only his family members washed his underwear, so he's embarrassed. But to avoid an awkward atmosphere, the homeowner tries to keep a natural pose. Suddenly, he sees a bear sewn onto one of the underwear, and Tawa explains that she covered the hole with it, so Shintaro didn't know where to hide his face. Soon, because of everything the girl has been doing for him in this house, he asks to at least wash his own underwear, but Tawa thinks he didn't like the little bear, so she asks if he prefers rabbits instead. Shintaro tells her to forget about it and just leave the underwear with him. So from that day on, washing underwear in the sink became a routine for the guy. When night falls, Tsunyuji can't stand pretending anymore that she didn't want to ask about that girl, but she was afraid of seeing crazy since in her mind that girl was flying. She tries to convince herself that she was just seeing things because people can't fly. Maybe seeing Shintaro with another girl has affected Tsunyuji, and she doesn't even know if she'll be able to make his lunchboxes after all. It's all consuming her so much that her mother had to check if she didn't drown in the bathroom from spending so much time in there. The next day, Shintaro refuses the lunch made by Tawa because he doesn't know how to explain it at school. With this, Tawa thinks the guy now hates her, especially since last night he insisted on sleeping alone on the floor and he never lets her go to school with him. So to calm things down, he accepts the lunch and informs that he will work until 9 tonight. The angel offers to go along, but Shintaro refuses and forces a smile expressing how lucky he is to come home knowing he'll have a great dinner, and that's enough to make Tawa really happy. On the way to school, Shintaro feels bad for avoiding the girl, but he's actually happy. He just can't fulfill all her wishes. Hours later, Shuchi catches Shintaro off guard by inviting him to lunch together, and Tsunyuji sees this as an opportunity to ask the boy if she can make his lunch. But since he already had lunch all ready and packed, he invents that he saved a fainting lady on the street and got food as a thank you. When he opens the lunchbox, there's a heart with his name written on it, and he tries to devour the food to pretend nothing happened. But it's too late. Tsunyuji is sure another girl prepared that lunch for him. Shuchi takes advantage of the girl's distraction to grab an omelette, but she doesn't let the insolence slide. On leaving school, Shintaro is exhausted even without knowing the reason, and he can't stand making senseless excuses anymore. He thinks he could introduce Tawa and try not to reveal that she's an angel, but the problem isn't even that. He doesn't want anyone to know he's living with a girl. Suddenly, a humble old woman who is a fortune teller approaches the young man saying he entered a phase of intense problems with girls, and to ward off this evil spirit, she's willing to sell these protections that cost 10,000 yen each. But just for the young man, she'll do 3 for 30,000. Dodging the spiritual scam he almost fell for, he recognizes that he is indeed having this issue with girls, while at the same time refusing to see Tawa as some sort of problem. As soon as he arrives at the fancy restaurant, the employee apologizes for leaving early on Saturday, but the boss is nice and happy for the guy's improvement. By the way, he comments that Izumi, the newly hired girl, will be on duty today and asks Shintaro to be nice to the newcomer. Shintaro is curious to know who this girl is after all, and right when he opens the first door, he finds out that the girl is apparently a fan of cherries. But as he spent more time than he should analyzing this situation, Izumi greets the guy and leaves a mark on his face to never be forgotten. During a shift, another employee asks what happened to the kid's face, but he brushes it off. Right after that, Izumi hands him a cold cloth to put on his face, and upon hearing the colleague's apology, she admits she shouldn't have locked the door after all. Then she introduces herself as Izumi Noel, and Shintaro has the brilliant idea to joke that she was born on Christmas because of her name, but to his surprise, that really is the reason for her name. Finally, Izumi asks him never to touch on the subject from earlier again and leaves, and even without being able to say a word, Shintaro is happy to know he won't be reported for harassment. Still, in the hustle and bustle of the service, even though the two haven't talked anymore due to the usual rush of being a waiter, the guy is struggling not to see Izumi in those cherry-printed underwear, so he bangs his head against the wall to rid his mind of this evil, and on top of that, he imagines Tawa getting mad at all this perversion. Speaking of Tawa, he still needs to explain where these lunchboxes are coming from, but so far he hasn't thought of anything. At least the cool boss lets Shintaro and Izumi go and offers a parfait to each, which were left in the fridge. The guy seems nervous with the girl's presence, so she asks if she should leave, but Shintaro replies that he actually feels kind of useless today. Izumi says he did his job perfectly, and even if she wasn't talking about the job, he is surprised to have been praised by this tough girl. As soon as they find the parfaits, Shintaro is unlucky that they are cherry-flavored, which instantly reminds him of an earlier scene, so he tries to pretend he's okay. However, it's Izumi herself who is red as a cherry despite claiming she doesn't care about what happened. However, the situation seems to spiral out of control as the two pretend like nothing's happening, and for some reason, the room's cooling seems to have reached a level that caused a snowstorm inside. So Shintaro notices the girl trembling from the cold, but as he approaches her, Izumi Noel confesses that she's a Yuki Anna. Suddenly, the cold begins to spread throughout the restaurant, bothering the customers until one of them asks the waitress to turn up the air temperature. Meanwhile, Shintaro isn't quite surprised by his new colleague's assertion. After all, he's living with an actual angel, but out of nowhere, she tries to backtrack on her statement, saying she was being silly and that the room's cooling is just broken. However, as she gets more nervous, the storm intensifies. To calm the nerves of the Yuki Anno, Shintaro says he doesn't mind who she is, so Izumi relaxes a bit. However, outside, the boss and the other waitress are wondering if the air conditioning malfunctioned, so Shintaro and Izumi decide to change as quickly as possible to leave the restaurant. After doing so, they run away as if their lives depended on it. And once they're far enough from fancy restaurant, Izumi proudly displays the parfaits she managed to bring even in the midst of all the confusion, and that's why they both burst into laughter. Meanwhile, the boss notices that the temperature has returned to normal as if nothing had happened. Tawa is sweating at fighting fight, getting genuinely tired and loving these crazy human games more and more. The angel got so addicted to this game that she didn't even realize the time passing, and seeing it was past 9, she wonders what could have happened to Shintaro. In the meantime, Tsumiyuji is going crazy thinking about her classmate's lunchbox, trying to unravel this mystery as if she were Sherlock Holmes of emotional dependency. To avoid losing it completely, the girl decides to have an ice cream on the street to clear her head. Nearby, Shintaro is trying to strike up a conversation with Izumi, but the girl seems seriously troubled about something. He mentions being surprised that they both attend the same school, but nothing cheers the girl up. Soon she questions whether Shintaro really believes what she said earlier about being a Yuki Anno, and calmly the boy reaffirms that he believes every word she said, without stressing Izumi out further. After all, he reflects, demons surely exist in a world of angels, so it became easier to accept the truth. Next, Izumi asks her colleague to keep something she's about to say just between them, that reveals that her family has had Yuki Annas for generations, perhaps due to a genetic issue. Just like Izumi, her mother and grandmother also carried this gene, so when they got angry, sad, or embarrassed, a snowstorm would surround them. Despite her younger sister and the rest of the family controlling their emotions well, Izumi always struggled to keep calm, so she always isolated herself out of fear of causing a blizzard when losing her cool. Over time, Izumi stopped going to school and stayed alone all the time, but when she started high school, she decided to change her life and start interacting again. When she was alone at home, Izumi's routine was reading manga and watching anime, so she started working to have contact with other people. Nevertheless, she's losing control because someone saw her changing clothes, so maybe her place is being stuck inside the house, and in the end, she's a lost cause. Then Shintaro acknowledges his colleague's effort to always serve customers with a smile on her face because even though most people want to change, few take action to do so. For this reason, Shintaro thinks Izumi is incredible, far from being a lost cause. Upon hearing this declaration, Izumi sheds a few tears, and this makes the boy think he destabilized her again. But these are tears of relief, so to speak. Izumi had never told anyone outside the family that she was a Yuki Anno, and she's happy to have been accepted. Therefore, even without knowing exactly how to start a friendship, she asks to be friends with Shintaro, and he accepts without hesitation, even though she's a Yuki Anno. Thus, Izumi asks to be called Noel. Finally, Shintaro asks if it's true that Yuki Annas melt and disappear if exposed, but Noel laughs and says no. At that moment, a feather from one wing falls near them, and when they look up, Tawa had just arrived to see how her friend is doing. However, the angel and the Yuki Anno clash instantly. As if that weren't enough, Tsumiyuji appears last and realizes she wasn't crazy to see a girl flying in the sky. Amidst this confusion, Tokumitsu Shintaro, who was just an ordinary 16-year-old guy working and studying, suddenly realizes that his life is far from normal as it has always been. In the midst of the confusion, one girl stared at the other, not understanding a thing of what they were seeing, until all three started expressing their feelings at the same time to Shintaro, who, in turn, can't process so much information and starts asking Tsumiyuji what she's doing there. The girl answers that she just happened to pass by until she remembers she's in sports clothes and regrets finding her beloved in that attire. With that said, Shintaro tries to be clever and asks if they can pretend no one saw anything and go back home, but that's simply impossible, so he's going to have to tell the truth. At the same time, Noel is enchanted to see a real angel before her eyes, and all she wants is to touch that skin that looks so soft. On the other hand, Tsumiyuji is a bit more reserved and questions if the girl is really an angel. Shortly after mustering up the courage, Tawa confesses that she's an angel who came to Earth to learn from humans. With this, Noel becomes even more excited, but Tsumiyuji doesn't seem as happy with this discovery. Given the circumstances, Shintaro sits with everyone and explains what's really going on and that he hid Tawa to avoid confusion. Tsumiyuji agrees never to tell anyone, also because no one would believe her if she did. Next, she asks Tawa why she chose Shintaro, and the angel explains that it was by chance because she was just looking for a place to sleep. Tsumiyuji comments with a sour expression that Shintaro is too nice, but then she demonstrates that she both hates and loves his demeanor at the same time. Then she remembers the bento from earlier and realizes that Shintaro lied about it being made by a lady. Besides the angel, the other girl is Izumi Noel from class 3, So Tsumivi asks what she's doing with Shintaro at this hour, as she's known as the Ice Queen because she never talks to anyone. Pushed against the wall, Noel starts losing her cool and threatens to make it snow. So Shintaro hurries to explain that they both work at the same place and left together. With this answer, Tsumugi silently thinks she should look for a job at the same restaurant. Adding more fuel to the confusion, Noel asks if the other two are just friends of Shintaro's, and he answers yes. With the girl's strange reaction, Shintaro asks if Izumi is okay, but she once again insists on being called Noel. Feeling sidelined, Tsumugi wonders why he calls Noel and Tawa by their first names but not her. After that, things calm down and Shintaro suggests it's time to leave, until Noel gathers courage and confesses to the girls that she's a Yuki Onna, making Shintaro spit out a piece of his soul. Soon after, Noel proves her point by bringing a light snowfall out of nowhere, and as she's so focused on it, she doesn't notice her skirt lifting, and when Shintaro tries to warn her, she gets even more upset because this boy also saw her changing earlier, and in that moment, the other two girls don't know where to hide their faces. However, Noel manages to regain control and explains that she gathered the courage to admit she's a Yuki Onna after seeing Tawa reveal her true identity. As the other two are Shintaro's friends, Noel trusts they won't tell her secret to anyone. Taking advantage of the confessional, Tsunuji reveals that she wet her bed until the 5th grade. Shintaro comments that the type of confession going on was of a different vibe, but the poor girl just wanted to share a secret like everyone else. After that, Tawa thanks for having met her new friends at that moment, and in response, Tsunuji introduces herself to the angel, while Noel wants to know if Tawa can adjust the size of her wings. As she grows her wings a bit, the girls approach to touch, and Shintaro silently realizes that everything turned out better than he imagined. Arriving home, the guy was completely exhausted, so Tawa goes to prepare something for him to eat. While mixing an egg in the bowl and lighting the stove, Tawa comments that the two girls she met today are wonderful people, and only a nice guy like Shintaro can attract people like them, and the young man feels embarrassed by such a compliment. The next day, a team of agents invades the apartment, claiming that the owner of the house is hiding an angel and Yuki Onna, so they send their team to search the place. In no time, Noel and a kappa that no one knows where she came from had been captured, and soon Tao was also in the hands of those men. Shintaro tries to save his friends, but he's also grabbed. As he's dragged away, Shintaro wakes up from the nightmare, and Tao is worried about the boy's screams. Arriving at school, the boy once again hadn't been able to sleep well, but soon Tsunuji approaches him with even worse dark circles, pretending it was nothing. In fact, she had even accepted well that angels and Yuki Onnas exist, but knowing that Shintaro lives with a girl is too much for her to handle. So she decides to take a step once and for all, asking if he's dating the angel or the demon. Shintaro justifies panic that he just met the two, and Tsunuji pretends to be calm, while inside her mind celebrates like crazy. Listening to the conversation, Shuchi approaches asking who this Tawa is, and Tsunuji lies that she's a distant relative of Shintaro's, and it's she who makes his lunchboxes every day. Shuchi is amazed at his friend's luck, so he asks if Tawa can make lunch for him too, but he leaves irritated as soon as Tsunubi tells him to get real. With that, Shintaro is glad to have someone to share a secret with, while Tsunubi loves the fact that it's between her and who she wants the most. After being alone again, Shintaro enjoyed the breeze of a peaceful day until he saw two pesky guys calling Noel to karaoke. The girl coldly ignores the duo, but her expression goes from hell to heaven upon noticing Shintaro's presence, and she reveals that she was waiting for the boy to arrive, just like she will every single day. By the way, she thinks it's a great idea for them to have a shared diary, but Shintaro remembers they have work after school, so he offers to accompany her there, but Noel wants to do this friend thing right, so she wants to go back with Shintaro on a day off. As she leaves out of the blue, Shintaro discovers why she claimed to be bad with friendships. As late afternoon sets in, Tawa takes a break from dinner preparations. The angel harbors such a deep desire to explore where Shintaro works that when a little kitten appears on the windowsill, Tawa decides to ask if she knows where Shintaro is working. Meanwhile, at the fancy restaurant, Shintaro is tasked with refilling the drink machines when Noel arrives all pumped up, and the boss calls the boy over for a chat. So he questions whether Shintaro and Noel are dating. Shintaro nearly chokes up his soul, but the boss makes it clear that employee relationships are allowed, especially since Noel herself requested to work on the same shifts as Shintaro next month. Nevertheless, the lad keeps insisting they're just friends until a coworker overhears and mentions attempting to befriend Noel, only to be threatened with a family curse for 15 generations in return. Anyway, the boss just wanted to check and then promptly asks the lad to help in the dining room when it gets busy. Speaking of which, a customer rings the bell for service, so the waiter heads to the corresponding table and finds Tawa and Tsunuji seated. Shintaro never imagined the angel knew where the restaurant was, so she explains that a kitten was showing her the way, and unfortunately, the little thing disappeared, but Tsumugi happened to be passing by and guided the rest of the way. Tsumugi pretends otherwise but only wanted to check out Shintaro's friendship with Noel. Finally, he takes the order for 2 drink sets and moves on to the next customer, while Tsumugi goes nuts seeing that masculine man in his work uniform. Meanwhile, an elderly lady seeks assistance, but interpreting it as a cry for help, Tawa goes to see what the woman needs. Then Tsumugi has to explain that attending to customers isn't her job, and she realizes that perhaps being an angel, Tawa is a bit scatterbrained, so someone has to clip her wings. Speaking of clipping wings, Tsumugi sees Noel and presumes that at least she and Shintaro won't have much contact during work hours until Noel rushes to inform the boy that the angel is there, causing Tsumugi instant distress. Seeing this, the boss calls Misuzumi for a moment and praises the energetic demeanor of the employee but asks her to tone it down a bit because this is a work environment. Right after that, she approaches Shintaro and asserts with her gothic voice that she can't be friends with him anymore. As she absorbs her own words, a blizzard forms around her body, and when Shintaro responds, understanding without breaking into tears, Noel glares even more and leaves, telling the boy never to speak to her again. In the meantime, Tawa was enjoying melon soda with cola, while Tsumugi was still reeling from the blow she received. Tawa wants to know what the next round will be, but her friend says she's already bloated, so they opt for something else to eat. Looking at the menu, Tawa thought she was still in heaven when she discovered the burger with cheese inside, but since she had prepared dinner today, she decides not to order. Upon hearing this, Tsumugi notes that besides being beautiful, Tawa is also a cook, which affects the girl a bit more. On the other hand, the innocent angel wants to know what gig means and is astounded to learn it means work, because according to her manual, it was side hustle. Tsumugi loses a bit of patience but answers Tawa's next question about whether Shintaro is a student or not given that he has a job. Then the friend explains that many students work part-time because their allowance isn't enough. Despite the great conversation, Tsumugi suddenly feels the urge to pee, so she leaves Tawa alone for a moment. Amidst the hustle of work, Shintaro worries the angel might do something, and indeed, Tawa takes advantage of her free time to attend to some customers, hopping from table to table until Shintaro grabs her and pulls her away. In a secluded spot, Tawa explains she just wanted to help finish the job quickly so Shintaro could go home, but he explains he's paid hourly, and as the angel didn't understand anything, he affirms that her helping won't change anything. So Tawa asks if Shintaro is forced to work because she's living with him, but the lad explains he's been working longer than that to gain experience before graduating, even though his parents send him an allowance. Still, Tawa thinks he does nothing while the boy works himself to death, but he makes it clear his life has improved a lot since meeting the angel, and she helps with everything at home. Then the girl calms down and informs Shintaro he'll come home to dinner ready. Spying on the conversation, the boss is enchanted by this beautiful love triangle, until Noel arrives with another idea in mind. Now she wants to work on all shifts where Shintaro is far away. Later that night, Shintaro reflects that a lot has changed since Tawa started living with him, and among those changes, some stand out. For instance, the ready-made and industrialized rice he used to buy had been replaced because now they only ate rice cooked in the pot by that angel from paradise. However, Shintaro found it strange that the girl would leave the rice pot in front of the TV because as far as he knew, that kind of thing belonged in the kitchen. Tawa argues that leaving the pot in the kitchen takes up all the food preparation space and besides, all the outlets there are occupied. Facing this, Shintaro understands the reason and leaves the pot where it is, and speaking of which, he asks how angels make food up in heaven. The Paradise Offspring explain that there are trees that bear fruits, but instead of apples and oranges, like here on Earth, these trees yield lunchboxes of warm rice in the shape of a heart. The boy finds amazing how things work up there, and not having to get up to get more rice in the kitchen. He agrees with the angel that the best place for the pot is right there, next to the table. In another corner of the city, Tsumugi is thinking too much about this crazy story that has been happening in her life, even more because Shintaro asked for advice about Tawa after the incident in the park. At the time, he was thinking of taking Tawa for a walk, and since they go by bus and train, he wants to know if it's a good idea to buy a transportation card for her. Before giving the card, Tsumugi recommends first buying a ticket for Tawa to see how transportation works, but what she really wanted was for him to buy it for her, not for the angel. Either way, whether she wants it or not, she has always found Shintaro to be a different guy, more independent than most for his age, because when his parents went to work abroad, he decided to attend high school in Japan, living alone in an empty apartment belonging to his aunt. So the young man took a course to enter school and got a job to supplement his parents' allowance, which convinced them to let their son stay alone in Japan. Because of this, Sumyuji already loved the boy's aunt for providing the house that would make Shintaro meet her. So far so good, she could accept that Shintaro is more ahead than her. Probably, but the fact that the guy lives with an angel and works with a snow woman is a bit too much for her head. Soon to calm down, Sumyuji takes a sip of tea and acknowledges that this Toa person is nice just like Izumi and therefore would like to help them in any way possible. But the truth is, she gets uncomfortable when Shintaro talks about other girls around her, and so Sumyuji regrets not taking action before these two appeared in his life. Always in this life, the girl regrets the things she doesn't have the courage to do because she could have offered to make the lunchbox first for her suitor, or she could have been honest about her feelings even though no one could predict that the guy would suddenly start living with an angel. So in the end, Sumyuji just feels too normal, with nothing special to offer since she's not an angel or a demon, so she asks her mother if she happens to be a descendant of yokai, because it would be good to have some standout characteristic for a change. However, her mother doesn't quite understand the reason for the fuss, but believes that being normal is also incredible. And that was the last thing her daughter wanted to hear. Deep down, what she wanted to hear was an "I love you" from Shintaro Tokumitsu. And without a doubt, the priority is to find a way to make that happen. In the meantime, the girl's youngest sibling comes downstairs hungry for snacks, but the mother doesn't want the kid munching before bed. So she tells him to take a bath to curb his hunger. On the topic, she remembers to show Sumyuji that she won a 2,000 yen voucher in a Senhora donut pastry shop draw, and since the promotion ends tomorrow, she should go with her friends as soon as possible. So despite the protests of the youngest, who also wanted to eat sweets, the eldest daughter can't stop thinking about the donut-filled meeting she wants to have alone with Shintaro, and so she hugs her mother tightly and thanks her for the opportunity of her life. The next day, the same trio as always is at school. This time, Sumyuji is at the limit of shame and rehearsing how she will invite the guy to enjoy the long-awaited donut. However, every time she comes across him during the day, wherever it may be, she gets so nervous that her speech falters and prevents the invitation from coming out. School time is already ending and still no word about the blessed donut, until Shuchi sees her with the donut coupon and takes it from her hand, inviting Shintaro to join them shamelessly. Normally, she would be upset with the guy, but today he was literally saving the day in the last minutes. However, a classmate reminds Shuchi that freshmen need to wash the club's balls today, so the guy is instantly downcast and he asks Shintaro to honor his name on this mission to send Hora Donut. Shintaro asks Sumyuji if it's cool for just the two of them to go, and she hides her ecstasy to calmly respond yes, while she feels proud for the first time to be friends with Shuchi since childhood. After the final school bell rings before going to the pastry shop, Shintaro asks to stop by the library first. Arriving there, he explains that he wanted to study about angels and yokais and find out if demons and kappas also exist. Sumyuji is afraid the guy is trying to assemble a love quintet, but at the same time, she melts with this nerd side of her friend. Furthermore, he thanks the girl for keeping him company, and as she was helping him with the research, Shintaro says that Sumyuji is helpful because of her manliness, a compliment she found bizarre to be given to a girl. So he used an example like in the park when she revealed her most intimate secret to make Tawa and Noel more comfortable. But since that day, the girl blurted out to the group of friends that she wet the bed. She would rather everyone had forgotten about that nonsense. Sometime later, the two of them were peacefully reading their books in the library, and Shintaro is so sleepy that he doesn't understand anything he's seeing anymore. Sumyuji comes face to face with a kappa and trembles, thinking they were just yokais who like cucumbers. As she was about to ask her friend about these creepy things she discovered in that book, he was already asleep on the table, which she found to be the cutest thing ever. Already in the fifth dream, Shintaro knew that his friend wet the bed. He just didn't imagine that the real secret Sumyuji kept was how much she was in love with him. After the boy's basic 1-hour nap, during that hour, Sumyuji spent staring at him. A heavy rain starts and threatens to ruin their plan to eat donuts, because even with umbrellas, they will end up wet by the time they reach the bakery due to the intensity of the rain. So Shintaro suggests that his friend buys the sweets and takes them home because if they delay it will be too close to dinner time. But the girl can't miss this unique opportunity, so Sumyuji risks her life for the donuts with Shintaro and runs through the rain. Fascinated by the woman's love for the blessed donut, he eagerly follows behind. However, in the middle of the race to the shop, a kid speeds by in 5th gear and smacks his face on the ground next to them. As he ends up breaking the umbrella and will be late for his prep school if he has to go home first, Sumyuji gives her umbrella to the little boy so he won't miss his studies and shares what's left with Shintaro. The boy asks if she wants to turn back and buy some sweets at the convenience store since this problem happened, but the maiden insists on continuing the journey to Lady Donut, even with only one umbrella for the two of them. Even after finally mustering the courage to say what she desires, she thinks she went too far and quickly retracts to suggest they better buy another one, But Shintaro readily accepts the proposal to continue this way, so Tsumivi went happily ever after while that long-awaited date at the bakery lasted. The next day, leaving school, Shintaro notices that he wasn't assigned to duty today, just like Noel wasn't, which means that this would be the day they should walk home together, as agreed. The problem with these days is that he never knows what to say in the frenetic conversations he has with his friend, because Noel runs over one subject after another and the poor guy can't keep up. That late afternoon, after incessantly talking about a protagonist from an isekai anime who's crazy and has fire in her eyes to solve the messes of her adventure, she remembers to ask when they're going to buy a joint diary. At that moment, Shintaro decides to be honest and says that a diary for two doesn't really exist, and that this kind of thing is what girls usually do at the beginning of elementary school. Although the boy sounded a bit rude, Noel finds humor in this observation and understands what her friend meant. Meanwhile, back there, a group of students sees Noel Azumi from Class 3, the girl whom nobody ever sees talking to anyone, this time interacting with someone. A bit further ahead, Noel asks if eating on the way back from school is also something elementary school girls do, and when the boy says no, she rushes into the convenience store and buys an ice cream that cools the girl's tongue to the point where she can't even speak properly, and the fact that she struggles with it being a Yuki Anna makes both of them burst into laughter. After that, Noel comments that she thought about buying some different things for this moment, but decided on the ice cream to give a bigger sense of friendship as something that could be shared. In fact, she had been thinking about what to buy since last night. After all, today is a special day, the first day she leaves school with a friend, and that got her so excited that she could hardly sleep last night. Speaking of which, on the night she told Shintaro that she was a Yuki Anna, Noel also couldn't sleep because she had never been able to open up like that to anyone before about the most difficult subject in her life. Shintaro also felt restless when he heard this news and even had a strange dream that night involving a kappa. Noel laughs and thanks for it not being a dream, her revelation, and also thanks her friend for understanding this very important thing for the girls so well. At the end of the shared path, Shintaro turns left after bidding farewell to Noel, and the girl warns that the next time they walk home together, he will buy the ice cream. When she gets home, Noel takes out of her pocket the wrapper from the ice cream she shared with her friend as a memento, and eagerly awaits their next meeting. The next morning, Tao was folding the freshly washed clothes from the house and singing a song she spontaneously created on the spot. It was about Shintaro's favorite vegetables for dinner when suddenly a loud noise came from the balcony, as if something had fallen. Rushing there, Tao found Shu, a miniature version of herself who had failed in her landing and ended up precisely in Shintaro's apartment. Sometime later, when the owner of the house arrived, the angel explained everything and asked the little one to introduce herself to him. But the girl introduced herself like any self-respecting child would in the most rushed and grumpy manner possible, and then promptly called Tao to come back home, exiting through the window. Unable to appear in public, Tao kept closing the window while the little one kept opening it again and again until the older one convinced Shu to drink some milk, her favorite, to calm her nerves. After 2 sips, Shu glared at the rest of the people with a sour expression, while Shintaro was amazed by the existence of such tiny angels. It made sense, though, considering cupids are like babies. Then Tao asked Shu what she was doing there, as descending without permission wasn't allowed. But the little girl shouted that God allowed her descent precisely because Tao had been silent for too long and she was worried. Tao explained that she was studying human behavior and that a week away wasn't that long, but to the stubborn little one it seemed like an eternity. After all, they were like sisters, and that's why she could sense Tao's presence and find her in that house. Unfortunately, Shu didn't think her friend would be staying in such a dump, especially with a human man, because they were nothing but perverted animals. Tao tried to calm the situation again by explaining that the poor guy was kind, and then she invited Shu to eat the food she had made to see if her bad mood was just hunger. However, the little one freaked out even more when she saw that Tao had the audacity to cook for this male specimen and even wash his clothes. Tao tried to teach her that his name was Shintaro, but all the possessed girl could manage to repeat was cursed Shintaro every time she referred to him. Emitting a less than angelic energy, Shu decreed that the man was a big perverted lunatic, forcing the angel to be his servant, even though Shintaro tried to justify himself to Tawa at every moment that it wasn't like that. So all that was left for Shu was to execute the human. Tawa told her she couldn't speak like that, so Shu corrected her sentence to, "Shintaro will meet his maker." Seeing that her scolding attempt failed, Tawa offered milk to the little heavenly girl again, and she even drank it, but not without pulling Tawa out of the house again, at least to get out of that suffocating room. Tawa replied that Shintaro said it was dangerous to leave the house, so Shu asked how she was going to learn about humans if she never left the apartment. In the end, Shu believed that her friend was trapped in that place and didn't even know what she was doing, so she should go back to heaven now. But as Tawa kept insisting, Shu turned her attention to the man, saying that he should rethink how he treats the angels since she is of a very high social status and leads a very different life than this one with the commoners. In response, Shintaro confessed that life with Tawa had its difficulties, which made the girl sad, but then he added that it was understandable, considering the enormous cultural differences. For instance, if one day he visited heaven, he would surely do strange things in the eyes of the angels. Despite all this, Shintaro felt grateful to know that Tawa always tried to please him and act correctly. Listening to every word, Tawa was enchanted by the boy's sensitivity, while Shu was almost bleeding from her eyes to see her beloved friend slipping through her fingers. Therefore, she didn't give up and accused all humans of being liars, and for sure this kid said everything just to please. However, Tawa replied that Shintaro was truly a good and kind person, and she believed that with all her heart. Shu argued that it was naive to believe that in just 1 week, but her friend reminded her that in this short time the boy had shown in every way that he really cared about her, even though she was a stranger at first. It was this kindness that calmed the fear Tawa felt when she came to Earth for the first time, despite being excited too. Knowing that someone cared for her made Tawa realize that she wasn't alone, and that was a reason for great happiness for her. Taking all this into account, the angel felt that she needed to repay this affection in some way, making her presence also bring that same happiness to him, and that's why she decided to stay. Ashamed, Shintaro felt he would never get used to a girl saying such things about him, while Shu saw that nothing worked and fled from the apartment, calling her friend an idiot for wanting to stay there. Shintaro and Tawa set out to find the little one, and the boy supposed that angels preferred to stay high up instead of near the ground, which Tawa confirmed, so they headed to the rooftop, where there was a rental garden that should still be open. Along the way, Tawa apologized for the things Shu said, but Shintaro knew she said those things because she cared about Tawa. A short time later, they reached the rooftop and found the little angel sitting in the garden, so Tawa apologized for only thinking about herself, while Shu only came because she was worried. The little one replied that her friend had done nothing wrong, so Tawa offered her a hug to stop her from crying. Shintaro watched the hug and interpreted the scene as a religious experience, and even though there was an angel there, children were still children, and he even found Shu cute now. However, while hugging Tawa, the little girl threw in Shintaro's face that he stole her, until her necklace started beeping, warning that it would send the child back home in a minute. With that, the girl started crying again, so she took her last chance to ask if Tawa really wasn't going back home with her. As Tawa stands firm in her decision, she keeps a small tally to always pray to ensure her friend doesn't suffer. As for Shintaro, she acknowledges that maybe he's not so bad since Tawa insists believing in her friend's judgment. But if he ever harms the angel, Shu will make sure he meets his maker, as she promised inside. However, Shu is sent back to paradise while ranting more against the poor guy. So Tawa takes the opportunity to take a look at the garden, as she had never been there to the ground floor. At the same time, she admits that Shu touched her with that talk about learning more about humans. Shintaro recognizes that things need to change and suggests that starting today after dinner, they'll go for a walk together every day. When Tawa gets used to it, she'll be able to go out in the morning while he's at school. That said, with her face all red, Tawa accepts the invitation and reinforces the kind image she has of him in her head. As promised, every day after dinner they took a walk around the city for Tawa to explore more of her knowledge, and Shintaro taught her how things work, like the color of the traffic light when crossing, always reminding her to look both ways. To his surprise, the supposed teacher makes a mistake and tries to cross with the light on, and it's the guardian angel herself who saves the human. One day, Shintaro comes in announcing he's home, and the angel comments that he always announces when he arrives, even though there's no one at home. As soon as Shintaro replies that it's force of habit, Tawa approaches to welcome him a bit closer than he's used to, and he couldn't help but feel that bittersweet atmosphere in the air. Speaking of which, they watch a TV show called Sweet Journey, and Shintaro reflects that his friend can now go out alone, and now the next step will be to teach her to take the bus and train. But thinking about it, he imagines the girl getting lost and being pursued by weird people, and just thinking about it terrifies the young man, so he decides as a true 16-year-old father that Tawa isn't ready to take public transportation. Meanwhile, on TV, the show features the sweet that sells the most in the candy store of the day, the shiny strawberry and muscat sandwich. Tawa drools over the sweet, and Shintaro remembers that they can get there by just passing through one station. Upon hearing this, Tawa is startled to discover that these stores shown on the program are real, because she heard that the people in the soap opera are just acting. But since these sandwiches exist, Shintaro invites her to eat one there, an invitation the girl accepts immediately. Anyway, on their way to the sweet shop, he gives Tawa a ticket to put in the station's turnstile, while she recalls seeing a train once on the day she arrived on Earth. Startled when the ticket was sucked into the machine, Shintaro explains that it comes out differently on the other side, and at the time of disembarkation, she thought the ticket should come out again for her to take home. Enchanted by the lively city, Tawa runs ahead, getting a small scolding from Shintaro, so she comes back and takes his hand for them to go together, completely changing his mood. Another mood that changed was Tawa's when she finally comes across the delicious, sweet sandwiches she saw on TV. While she ordered a mixed fruit sandwich and a strawberry and milkshake, Shintaro ordered a red and green apple sandwich and a honey shake. In the end, the boy was happy to have gone out with Tawa and to see her eat with such satisfaction. So the tour continues through the city until they reach an ecological park. Tawa sees a swan paddle boat and thinks it's real because she remembers a human play she saw called Swan Lake, a very beautiful love story. Shintaro explains what that is and invites the girl to try it, so soon they were pedaling together towards love, a love that Shintaro feels as he watches Tawa's beautiful legs spinning in the pedal motion. Suddenly, Tawa gets excited in the activity and accelerates the swan until it turns into a jet ski. Seeing the young people together, an elderly couple finds it the cutest thing in the world when two lovebirds enjoy the moment. Shintaro gets embarrassed and this time takes control of the pedal to fly away from there, while Tawa asks what lovebirds are and he pretends not to know. But as they leave the swan, the old couple's phrase sticks in the boy's head, realizing he's on a date. A little further ahead, Tawa sees a dango shop and pulls Shintaro to eat, but he lets go of her hand on impulse. Then he explains that holding hands is something only very close people do. At that moment, an irritated woman knocks Tawa to the ground as she changes course. Although the angel understands that the woman must be in a hurry, Shintaro apologizes to her because every time she's in danger on Earth, it's the fault of humans, who are a bunch of selfish people who only care about themselves, and Shintaro thinks maybe he's the same way. That said, Tawa teaches that it's easier to care for others when we care for ourselves, and at that moment, Shintaro deeply feels the happiness of having met this incredible person, but decides to cut the mood by inviting his friend to eat the dango she wanted so much. So they walk to the snack bar together, but without holding hands. After a whole day out, Shintaro and Tawa head back home while the angel gives thanks for the day and the delicious fruit sandwich. Speaking of which, they need to think about dinner, so the boy suggests they grab some takeout at the convenience store so Tawa won't have to cook so late. When they reach the building, the girl mentions she'll quickly prepare some hot tea. But as they arrive at the apartment door, there's a girl sitting there looking downcast. Shintaro goes to check out what's up until the woman stands up and hugs him tightly, and then Shintaro realizes it's Mary. Soon she's inside devouring the pork takeout they bought as if she hadn't eaten in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Shintaro reflects that the freeloader didn't even ask to grab some grub. Mary apologizes for not visiting her friend earlier as she's been busy, and Shintaro acknowledges that she takes her work very seriously. At that moment, the visitor starts choking and Tawa gives her something to drink. Meanwhile, the angel asks who Mary is, and Shintaro explains she's his aunt, his father's younger sister, who works as a manga artist. With that said, the girl suddenly screams out of nowhere, making her nephew think she's drunk, but she explains she's just really tired because she hasn't slept in 3 days. Tawa asks what a mangaka is, causing the artist to immediately shut down, until Shintaro grabs a manga as an example. Mary complains it's not her work, and the boy admits embarrassedly he doesn't have any of her publications. She complains her nephew should be the first in line to buy them, but he can't concentrate on reading knowing it was made by his aunt. With that said, Mary melodramatically tells the boy to forget she exists, but Shintaro can't do that, considering the girl ate his and Tawa's dinner. His aunt begs for forgiveness for doing so, claiming those sleepless and foodless nights have affected her ability to reason. As always, Shintaro takes it in stride, while the girl continues to complain she even had to wait for him to come home. Shintaro argues she could have bought something to eat while waiting, but by that time exhaustion and hunger had stolen the girl's brain. Besides, she'd been waiting for Shintaro to come home since 3 p.m. and couldn't call him because she left her phone at home to avoid being tracked by her boss. Anyway, it's now Shintaro's turn for his stomach to growl, and Tawa sees no other option but to head to the kitchen at this hour, but Mary offers them a cake she brought. After all, it's her birthday today. By the way, no one wished her a happy birthday all day, not even the boss, after she finished all the work that was pushed onto her. Therefore, Mary decided to buy her own cake and share it with Shintaro, and for that reason, she can't help but throw a fit, calling the boss a proofhead. So shortly after, Shintaro lights a candle for his aunt and sings happy birthday in improvised English, but the woman can't stop crying for a minute, so the boy turns on the light while Mary explains her emotions are on edge when she finishes a job. Tawa hands her a cloth to wipe her tears, and the woman returns the gesture, saying she loves Tawa embarrassingly. Speaking of which, Mary finally asks who the girl in the room is, and Shintaro thinks about how to justify a girl living there without the owner's permission, who is his aunt, let alone an angel. However, Tawa takes responsibility and says her name, expressing how grateful Shintaro feels for his aunt letting him stay in this apartment for now. The boy is afraid the angel will say she lives there, so he ends up abruptly interrupting Tawa's introduction and tries to communicate mentally with her not to reveal this fact. In the face of this, Mary gives a mischievous little laugh and asks if the girl there is the nephew's girlfriend. Shintaro tries to explain she's a classmate and they're having a meeting for the school festival committee. However, Mary notes that festivals only start in the fall, so Shintaro gets increasingly flustered with these flimsy excuses. Then she asks Tawa if the boy is popular at school, since she's his guardian and needs to know. Shintaro refutes this claim, so the manga artist complains to Tawa that her nephew is being mean when she changed his diapers when he was little. By the way, Shintaro was a darling when he was a baby, and Tawa is enchanted imagining the little boy. Changing the subject, the boy's aunt gives him a killer look and asks why the girl calls him by his first name. Shintaro realizes that it's just a nickname and that everyone at school calls him that as a joke, piling more and more lies onto this snowball that his life has become alongside the angel. With tempers calmed, everyone finally shares the cake and talks more calmly, and Tawa announces she'll make some tea. Mary praises the girl for being so thoughtful, so she asks if she happens to be an angel, and it would be nice to have someone like that in the family. With that said, Shintaro nearly spontaneously combusts and tries to explain in every way possible that there's nothing between them. Mary gets discouraged by her nephew's attitude and goes to the bathroom, noticing there are 2 toothbrushes in there. Shintaro improvises and justifies that he likes to divide them between his front and back teeth, while he thinks his aunt is too sharp for someone who doesn't sleep. As she sits on the toilet, the woman feels the mental fog dissipating and the carbs flowing into her brain, returning her humanity. While washing her hands, she's surprised to see her nephew inviting a girl into the apartment and analyzing the situation. She pieces things together and seems to have had a major revelation. For this reason, she exits the bathroom shouting for the young man not to get involved with toxins and generalized carnal relations, and Shintaro stops Tawa from innocently repeating that phrase to ask what it means. Right after, the tea was on the table and Mary thanked everyone but offered to take Tawa home since it's late and her family will start worrying. Without knowing what excuse to give this time, Shintaro agrees and they all head out to take Tawa home. On the way, the angel asks what the hell she has to do, so the boy suggests she separates from them at some point, then flies back to the apartment without anyone seeing her, hiding until his aunt leaves. Mary asks what they're whispering about and Shintaro makes up that it's about the festival. Changing the subject, she thinks it's better to explain to Tawa's parents why she arrived late, but the girl declines the help and says she'll stay there, quickly saying goodnight to the others and running off. Mary runs after her and informs her that Shintaro might be a bit shy, but deep down he's very kind, and that's why she would like the girl to continue being his friend. With that said, Tawa gets emotional and says goodbye, while the boy wonders how long his aunt will stay there. As soon as they return to the apartment, the angel observes the conversation between Shintaro and Mary, and the woman keeps secret what she talked to Tawa about the farewell. Bitter, he then asks his aunt to eat and leave, but she informs him she's not leaving tonight and even bought an overnight kit at the market. Shintaro raises his voice and insists his aunt leave, otherwise Tawa will end up sleeping on the balcony, but Mary refuses to go back home as she'll have to work and she can't give her best because her boss didn't wish her a happy birthday. Then she shouts that Kita is an idiot, making Shintaro remember that his aunt's editor is Squeamix. Therefore, Mary is talking about Kita Mitsuru, the genius known as Baron of Oil and legend of the heavy feudal lord. Mary is startled by the fanboy outburst from the young man and quickly becomes sad and comments that Kita doesn't care about her because she doesn't sell much. Shintaro tries to cheer the girl up by saying that maybe she's famous since they made an anime adaptation of her manga. Still, the woman is convinced that she's a burden to her boss, an example of what a manga artist shouldn't be doing. Because of this, she refuses to leave and orders the boy to get a blanket for her. Shintaro argues that the last train of the night hasn't passed yet, but Mary turns to declare her stay. Tawa signals that it's okay for her to stay on the balcony until someone rings the doorbell, and Mary shouts for Shintaro not to open the door. The boy ignores the tantrum and disobeys his aunt, allowing a monstrous being to invade the house looking for the lousy author hiding there. Mary despairs at the arrival of Kia Mitsuru, who knew her employee would be in the apartment she bought after becoming a little famous. Mary asks her boss not to call her a little famous, otherwise she'll cry, while Shintaro can't believe Keita has been a woman all this time. Mary explains that the boy there is her hidden son, but Shintaro tells the truth and says he's renting the apartment from his aunt. Embarrassed, Keita bows and apologizes at the same time, revealing that her last name is actually Mikuru, not Mitsuru. Then she says she wouldn't have locked Mary out if she had known she had a nephew to take care of, but Shintaro brushes it off and prefers his aunt not to show up there. Finally, Keita calls the employee by her name, causing her despair, promising to work like a convict to make up for today, but the boss just wishes her a happy birthday, surprising everyone. Keita even bought a cake and went to Mary's house, but it was empty, and she panicked. That's why she regrets fleeing from her busy schedule to give attention to this great employee. Hearing that, Mary can't contain herself and swoons, and Keita tells them to eat the cake quickly so Mary can get back to work. At the farewell, Shintaro tells Keita he's looking forward to the next Baron of Oil, and she replies that she'll ask the young man's opinion when she decides to make the sequel. On the way out, Mary jokes that the boss doesn't have time for that, and Keita retorts that she would if a certain manga artist did miss deadlines all the time. As soon as they get rid of the two, Shintaro takes a deep breath, while Tawa comes out of the balcony and comments that she was happy to see her friend with someone from the family for the first time, and it was cute to see him all awkward next to his aunt, making the boy even more embarrassed. Meanwhile, Mary suggests to the boss that she writes a script for a romantic comedy about a boy and a girl living in a studio apartment, but Keita doesn't like the idea much. On any other day, Shintaro rushes to get home quickly and grabs some fresh dinner, but suddenly a girl comes out of nowhere and bumps into him from behind. At first sight, he notices the girl's beauty and the red eyes she has. Then two guys run towards her, so the girl reveals that she's being chased and asks for help. Without hesitation, Shintaro grabs the girl's wrists and runs with her, causing the two guys to give up on catching her because she dropped her Dracula book. After shaking off the duo, Shintaro reflects that this is starting to feel like a cliché manga scene, where the girl is saved from her pursuers. Out of the blue, the girl interrupts his thoughts with a rather attractive sniff, saying his scent is pleasant. Shintaro recalls he was working, so he figures he probably smells like food. Then he asks if the girl is okay, noticing her leg is all bandaged up, but she explains it's just her style. Not knowing what to say, he now wants to know who those guys were who were chasing her, and she presumes they're descendants of Professor Abraham Van Helsing, her archenemy who has been plotting evil for 134 years. Along with his minions, Van Helsing crossed the seas to the east to destroy all vampires. Hearing this, Shintaro thinks he'd encounter a kappa or a demon before that, while the unknown girl reveals she's from the last lineage of the noblest of Transylvania, the supreme being, the pinnacle of creation, the vampire Lushka. Hearing that, Shintaro reflects that he's already living with an angel and has befriended a Yuki Anna, and now that he's helped a girl in flight, he discovers she's a vampire. Suddenly, the girl's colored lens falls out, revealing the real shade of her eye. She tries to justify that the exhaustion from the escape dried out her iris, then removes her eye patch to show her right eye red, which she claims is the manifestation of her bloodlust, proof that she's a vampire. However, the other lens also falls out, and she starts grumbling that each one costs 1,500 yen. Shintaro complains that he was tricked, but the supposed vampire now argues that she's shedding her skin and insists that she is indeed a vampire. Faced with the girl's persistence, Shintaro kneels down and realizes he's encountered another crazy person in his life, but that doesn't mean he can simply leave her there alone. So he asks if it's okay to accompany her home or to the police station, but she suggests a safe place nearby. Soon they arrive at the cafe where Lushka works, a mofu maid. The girl would love to repay Shintaro for his help, so she asks him to wait inside while she changes, but he tries to back out, especially because he doesn't even know if high school students can enter a maid cafe, besides having left Toa waiting. For this reason, he leaves in a hurry without even saying goodbye properly, so Lilushka admires his scent once again. Upon arriving home, Shintaro tells Tawa that he just met a girl who pretends to be a vampire due to suffering from the protagonist syndrome, which is usually teenagers who dream of being the center of the universe. Tawa says she loves dreams, but Shintaro explains that this one in particular isn't so cool. Then he says goodnight to his friend, and they both go to sleep. Suddenly, someone appears on Shintaro's balcony who, upon hearing a noise, opens his eyes and notices a vampire licking his neck, so the boy screams in terror and turns on the light. Dazed, Tawa wakes up and sees a girl standing in front of her, and Shintaro explains that it's the girl from earlier who pretends to be a vampire. He asks the girl how she got there, and she explains that she tracked his scent because it's the first time she's attracted to someone's smell, so she would never forget it. Then, Shintaro asks her how she entered, and the supposed vampire tells him she climbed up the balcony. Looking at the door there, Shintaro sees the glass surgically cut, as if a break-in tool had been used. Tawa thinks the apartment owner is talking to her, while he tells Velishka to scram. However, she makes it clear she'll only leave after giving one last lick on the boy, or at least a sniff. Shintaro understands that the girl thinks she's a vampire, but he doesn't intend to turn his apartment into a hentai episode, so he kicks the intruder out once again. However, At the same time, he wonders how the hell she climbed onto the balcony. Meanwhile, Tawa is excited to see a vampire for the first time, so Shintaro says once again that the girl is just pretending, but she proves it to everyone by flapping her bat wings. Faced with irrefutable evidence, the boy acknowledges that all of this is really happening, but wants to know why the girl was wearing contact lenses. Then she explains that she's a Japanese vampire but actually wanted to be from Europe. Anyway, she strikes the powerful pose again and declares once again that she's Lilishka, so Shintaro and Tawa say their names in the most common way possible, and since everyone is properly introduced, he pushes the vampire creature out. Once again, she asks to sniff the boy's neck, as she left his blood intact as proof of her mercy, and that she doesn't do things without permission. Hearing this from the girl who invaded his home and licked his neck while he slept, Shintaro doesn't even know how to respond. The vampire adds that, besides that, she chose to live without blood because she's a last-generation vampire and doesn't eat such things, as she can sustain herself by drinking any red liquid like a red fruit balalaika or Welch, a sensational grape juice. Shintaro looks for a grape juice for the girl to leave, and while he looks for some drink for the vampire, she drools over his neck and holds herself back from advancing. However, she can't hold back and jumps on the boy, asserting her will by force, and despite that, she still didn't leave when everyone went to sleep. While she insists on just putting the tip of her teeth on the poor boy's neck, Tawa cries in fear of her eating her friend. The next day, Shintaro wakes up and notices that Lilishka had left, while Tawa remembers that something very bad happens when vampires are exposed to sunlight. Faced with this, the two lament the fact that the girl turned into ashes. Later, upon arriving at school, Shintaro remembers that Tawa had been frantic upon realizing this, but the boy hadn't seen any ashes around. Nevertheless, Tawa isn't going to vacuum today just to make sure she doesn't throw Lilishka in the trash. However, despite this memory, Shintaro prefers to believe that the intruder simply left at some point during the night, but it would be good to confirm this to reassure Tawa, so he plans to swing by where she works to ask. Then Tsumugi appears and comments that Shintaro doesn't seem well, and he responds that he didn't sleep well last night. The girl agrees, mentioning the panic of the final exams next week, but the guy had simply forgotten about that detail. Later, when the lunch bell rings, Shintaro tells Shuchi that he's going to the cafeteria because he didn't bring lunch today. Shuchi asks his friend to get him a pudding because it's cafeteria policy to limit 30 puddings per day per student, and he's already used up his quota. Soon, Shintaro faces the line to get his grub, but before handing the pudding to Shuchi, he decides to eat the rice ball since he skipped breakfast and is starving. So while enjoying his nibble before the main course, Shintaro feels a lick on the rice stuck near his mouth. The boy complains that it's not allowed to enter the school in cosplay, but Lilishka explains that she also studies there, just in room 2 instead of 1 like Shintaro. This time, she left the room and followed a familiar scent outside, so she followed this trail until she got there. Shintaro wonders if this girl is a vampire or a dog, but either way, he asserts he's happy because he thought Lilishka had turned to ashes. She responds that she doesn't like the sun, but she doesn't turn to ashes because of it, and that's why she wears a hoodie. So Shintaro invites her to sit in the shade. Arriving there, she reveals that she left without notice because he and Tawa were sleeping and she needed to go home and change into her uniform before heading to school. Speaking of which, she says she would like to come back to Shintaro's house tonight, but he makes it clear that he wouldn't like that to happen. In the midst of this, he remembers that he promised to take the pudding to Shuchi, so he hastily says goodbye to Lilishka and goes up to the classroom. Shuchi feels blessed to have gotten another sweet, and Tsumugi asks if Shintaro took a long time in line at the cafeteria. Spilling the beans, the guy asks his friend if she knows someone named Lilishka from room 2, a girl with silver hair and a hoodie with rabbit ears. Tsumugi isn't sure, but a classmate comments that actually that person is called Kagami Siguri. Another classmate remembers that in her presentation to the class, that girl said in front of everyone that she was a vampire, and everyone thinks she's a character for never leaving that role. Speaking of the vampire, Lilishka was eavesdropping on Shintaro at his classroom door, and when he turns his face back to avoid eye contact, the girl seems to have been hurt. After school, the boy intends to get home as quickly as possible and let Tawa know that Kagami is okay, until Tsumugi approaches him and offers to copy the material for the exams. Shintaro gets excited about this proposal, so the two agree to go to the library together so he can copy the material. Inside, the girl was jumping for joy at having more time with her beloved, but Lilishka's relative appears through the window and asks Shintaro to follow him urgently. Soon the boy says goodbye to Tsumugi and runs after the bat. Noel sees him passing by and says hi, but he ignores her. Focused on the chase, the guy reaches the door of the Occult Research Club. Shintaro trembles with fear and gives up entering there, but Lilishka opens the door without regard and extends her hand to her classmate. Shintaro asks the girl to stop releasing bats around the school, but she explains that it's a familiar. Then inside the occult club, Lilishka orders Shintaro Takumitsu to become her servant. In response, the boy says it's not going to happen, and the vampire asks why not. He questions if he really needs to answer that, so she argues that he will have the privilege of having a super cute familiar as a superior, in addition to an invitation to her birthday next month worth 3,000 yen, but drinks not included. Impatient, Shintaro asks where this story of being a servant came from out of nowhere, so Lilishka confesses that she was hurt when he said she couldn't go to his house, and she feels like Shintaro wants to avoid people knowing that they know each other. The girl regrets this, as for the first time in her life, she felt an unforgettable aroma, and she thought destiny would unite them. But since Shintaro refuses to be sniffed, then she must become the master of the boy so he has no decision-making power. With that said, the girl loses her temper and advances towards the human until Noel and Tsumugi end up entering the room after chasing Shintaro. Then they look up and are horrified to see a flying vampire. Neither Noel knew that vampires existed, nor Lilishka imagined that snow women were real. Desolate in a corner, Tsumugi feels like the competition for Shintaro's attention has increased even more, while Lilishka apologizes for the confusion she has caused, following the boy's scent and pursuing him. She begins to cry because she doesn't know how to act normally when all she wanted was to be Shintaro's friend. Hearing this, Noel understands how the vampire feels because she also has difficulty controlling her emotions, so Shintaro retracts and allows the girl to come to his house occasionally. Noel takes advantage of the momentum and asks if she can also visit her friend, while Tsumugi would love to invite herself as well, but she doesn't have the courage. The next day, Tawa's humming a new improvised song about doing laundry even in the scorching heat that leaves her sweating just from folding clothes. After finishing her work, she looks up the sky and notices that since she arrived in the human world, this is the first time the season's changing. Meanwhile, at the Occult Research Club, the three friends celebrate that the exams are finally over, although they're exhausted. But as if that weren't enough, they're still in this occult room instead of being at home sleeping. A week ago, Noel remembers the day he entered the club room for the first time just to ask Shintaro if they could study together, because that's surely something friends would do together. Riding on that wave, Tsumugi gathers courage and asks if she can join in too. So first of all, Shintaro says he needs to check with Tawa if she minds. Besides, he says he's never studied with friends before, so he's not sure if it's going to be that easy. Soon Lilishka suggests they study there in the occult room, and everyone agrees, especially if it means spending time with Mofumofu, the vampire's familiar. Speaking of her, the girl mentions that Tsumugi's burden in this study session is the heaviest of all. Soon emerging from her cardboard coffin, she confesses that she appreciates any help she can get for the exam. That's why she considers Tsumugi a true goddess. Noel agrees, and Shintaro is quick to point out that he would have flunked the exams if it weren't for the girl. All the care and dedication that the substitute teacher had with the group really gave them a tremendous boost, and everyone is overflowing with gratitude for what she did. Faced with so much praise, the girl becomes embarrassed until she notices that at one point Shintaro called her by her first name, something he had never done before. Shortly after, he goes back to calling her Satsumi, her last name, to ask how she is, and the girl pretends it's nothing, changing the subject by asking if they're not going to disturb the rest of the club members if they continue there, since the exams are over. Shintaro thought Lilishka was the only member, but since that's the case, he agrees to leave. Noel suggests they go somewhere to celebrate the end of the exams, and Shintaro invites Kagami to join them. At this point, the vampire tells the boy to take that name out of his mouth, because Kagami Sayuri is the codename she uses as a disguise, so she should always be called Lilishka. By the way, the noble name Lilishka comes from the combination of Lily, which is the Yuri of Sayuri, with the name of a famous vampire. While Shintaro questions why the girl needs to pose every time she talks about these things, Noel asks her if that famous vampire is the one from the Van Helsing movie. The vampire confirms, so Noel comments that it's great that Dracula's brides have names because that's rare. After that, Shintaro mentions that the club needs at least 3 members to be considered official, so Lilishka says that besides her, there's a skull she found in the storage room, acting as the provisional president. Finally, the 3rd member opens the door just as Shintaro does and ends up falling on him and then on the floor. Seeing her underwear exposed, the girl cries and leaves the boy feeling guilty. Soon the vampire introduces her friend as Tsurumi Hizui. Still sad for having knocked the girl down, Shintaro tries to break the ice and says his name to her, but the girl is terrified and hides behind Lilishka. Seeing this, the vampire asks the boy not to mind because Hizu harbors a deep hatred toward the human race, driven by the force of her tragic karma. During this speech, Izui tries to explain that she's just a little shy, and after that, they all say goodbye and Shintaro asks Lilishka if she's going to stay for the club activity or go with them. The girl thinks for a moment and decides to accompany the boy and company because she needs to talk about something with the three. On the street, she explains that the occultism club only had third-year students and they graduated earlier this year. The club was going to end due to lack of members, but Lilishka and Hizui joined and held the fort. Being the only 2 members, the club might be doomed to its end if no one else joins, turning the occult research club into a mere unofficial group. However, the vampire decided that the 3 classmates are worthy of joining the organization, so she hands them an application to explore the depths of the abyss. Shintaro refuses the proposal outright, so the vampire appeals once again to her cute familiar, but he reminds her that the bat would be his senior. Then she ups the ante by mentioning that the club has air conditioning, soda, and unlimited tea, which shakes the boy a bit, but he soon composes himself and declares that he won't participate. With that settled, Shintaro apologizes to Shizui for involving her in this, and again the girl reacts as if she had seen a ghost. Thus, the boy tries to calm her by asking what she likes about the occult, and she starts crying again. Faced with this, he's sure the girl hates him, so he gives up on making conversation. Lilishka answers for her friend, saying that she loves books and that she reads in the club room because she gets scared when someone sits next to her in the library. Shintaro understands the reason, he just doesn't know why she would choose the occultism club. Following the path, the group decides to eat at the Senhoradi restaurant at the station, but inadvertently they end up discovering a festival that was happening nearby, so they decide to look for something to eat there instead. Noel is enchanted by being able to attend a festival with her friends because it's something she's never done before, and Shintaro comments the same. Sumyuji asks Shizui if she often goes to festivals, and she responds with all the embarrassment in the world that she likes this type of event, especially the summer ones. Looking around, Shintaro notices he's lost track of Lilishka. Until she appears with everything she could find different at this festival. Wearing a mask, she emphasizes that everyone has multiple personalities and expressing them can also be a form of expression. Later, she questions if everything is okay with the boy because his perfume has a bittersweet tone of anguish, although she loves that smell and wants to bite the boy. Shintaro reveals that he thinks Shizui is more afraid of him than the others, so Lilishka considers it was because the boy saw her underwear. Despite the desperation of those involved, Noel reveals that this kind of thing happens, especially because it has happened to her before, but Shintaro is trying to convince everyone that he didn't see any underwear. Sumyuji sees that the atmosphere is getting heavy and thinks maybe it's better for them to split into groups and go eat something. Without thinking twice, Noel pulls Shintaro by the arm and Sumyuji rushes to keep up, leaving the 2 short girls behind. With that done, everyone enjoys the festival as best they can, with all its rides and delicious foods. Lilishka unleashes her evil eye to play target shooting, but it doesn't have the expected effect on the shot. Later, they all eat ice creams together, and Noel speaks with a frozen tongue that this is the moment of friendship she always hopes for. At that moment, someone passes by with a serving of buttered potatoes and decides they want some too, and soon all the girls follow together to the food stall. Shintaro notices that the girls with him are bottomless pits, while he also means to find something to eat. At one stall, he sees grilled corn, and at another, chilled cucumber, something only seen in the summer. Anyway, he decides to try it since he's never had it before. Beside him, Shizui appears with sparkling eyes upon seeing the cucumber, until Shintaro asks if she's going to get one too, terrifying the poor girl once again. Nevertheless, Shintaro insists on changing her attitude towards him and buys a cucumber for the girl. Then he says goodbye, but Shizui manages to catch his attention back with great difficulty. She tries to say what she's thinking, but her throat tightens and she can't, until the other girls arrive, leaving Shizui embarrassed once again. As it starts to get dark, the group decides to head home after having a great day at the event. Shintaro didn't expect to enjoy a summer festival like this, going there as soon as the exams were over and having fun with friends until the late afternoon. He loved it all despite knowing it would have been even better if Tawa had been there with them, but he promises to bring the angel one of these days because she'll surely love it. In a secluded corner, Lilishka is reciting enigmatic sayings about a fireball and a pale moon on a night of chaos, making Noel think it's some kind of horror movie. Meanwhile, the vampire recites about hope and despair dancing with the night as she approaches the edge of the bridge. Finally, she utters memento mori and begins to take flight, but Shintaro only remembered she could fly after he jumped to save the girl, thus falling into the river under the bridge. Everyone panics and looks at each other, not knowing what to do until Shizui takes responsibility and jumps into the water. Deep down, Shintaro is increasingly breathless as he sinks, and the depth of the river surprises the young man. Suddenly, Shizui reaches him and grabs his arm. They resurface, and Lilishka apologizes for getting too carried away on the bridge. Shintaro confesses he was scared, and then turns to thank Shizui for saving him. At that moment, she finally gathers the courage to say what she wanted to say earlier. Actually, she doesn't have any personal problem with Shintaro, but she's not used to talking to boys, and that caused her a lot of shyness. For that reason, she apologizes if she gave a bad impression. On the other hand, Shintaro apologizes for making the girl nervous and admits he could have been more patient to listen to what she had to say. That said, the boy looks up the sky again and repeats that it was a good day despite him falling into the river. As the boy speaks, an intense glow forms around Shizui, and soon a halo forms above her head. Shintaro asks if she's also an angel, but on her back there's a huge turtle shell. In fact, what she has on her head is not a halo, but a kappa plate. Subiuji can't stand seeing that and ends up fainting, while Lilishka laments that her friend was discovered so early. Next, she asks Shizui if she ate a cucumber, and the kappa admits she did. In response, the vampire explains that if Shizui eats a cucumber and enters the water within an hour, she turns into a kappa. However, she's not an ordinary kappa, since her grandfather is the head of the Kappa Federation of Japan, which secretly governs the country. This means she's the future #1 kappa in Japan. Having said that, Noel approaches Shizui to comfort her, saying that everyone there knows that her friend is a vampire. Besides, she herself is not a normal human. The short girl asks if she's also a kappa, but Noel says it has nothing to do with her. Anyway, she assures that everyone in this group knows exactly what the girl is going through, and that's why she'll be safe with them. Thus, Shizui looks around and realizes that indeed the people there seem trustworthy, so she agrees to be part of the group. Then, Shintaro brings Tawa to meet the new member, excited as always to meet this different species.
The next day, Shintaro was chatting with Miwa while the two of them tidied up the house. He was venting about something that happened at his job, but he got worried he might be bothering the girl and apologized for it. However, seeing that Toa couldn't care less, he noticed he had never seen the angel angry about anything, so he asked her if she happened to be immune to anger. The girl replied that she gets nervous about some things, but she couldn't remember a single example to give. Faced with this, the boy considered that every angel is as calm as Toa, but then he remembered Shiyu, who was quite the pest. Then he caught a whiff of delicious food and went to see what his friend was cooking, and it was a special miso soup with lots of vegetables. Toa offered him a vegetable to feed him, but the boy felt embarrassed and decided to try it on his plate instead. Later, after the last class of the trimester, Noel had the idea for them to stop by a bakery they had never noticed before that was there. Without a second thought, the girl grabbed Shintaro by the arm and dragged him inside. Meanwhile, Toa was returning from the market to home after forgetting to buy green onions when she saw Noel almost feeding her friend from inside the bakery. For this reason, she felt anger for the first time, while Noel tried to convince the guy to accept the sweet, although he wasn't very happy with this insistence and refused just like he did with Toa. Still, upon arriving home, Shintaro announced he bought cake to share with his friend, but she was desolate in her corner with a sullen look, refusing the sweet. Shintaro asked if she was upset about something, so Toa expressed a feeling she couldn't even understand herself. However, upon further reflection, she began to think she was jealous of him and tried to bury that feeling by changing her mind about the cake. After eating the dessert and being delighted, she thanked him for remembering her. Then the boy mentioned that his summer vacation starts tomorrow, so he invited the girl to go out with him. Even though he's broke and they'll have to come up with a cheap date, they could just take a walk together or ride the train. Happy with the invitation, the angel not only accepted but also exclaimed how happy she is living in this apartment, which once again left the homeowner embarrassed. In another part of the city, Noel was at home in total darkness, watching a cartoon where two girls are going to their first year and planning to make 100 friends. Noel would also love to make 100 friends to eat rice cakes at the top of Mount Fuji, but she doesn't have that ability. In fact, on the day she tried, she messed everything up, and since then she stopped going to school. To this day, she hasn't overcome this trauma within herself, but at least she managed to return to school as well as having a job. Moreover, she may not have 100 friends, but Shintaro makes up for all that according to her. Then Noel sees an article about an interview with the director of The Phantom Girl and the Mysterious Staircase, a movie she wanted to see. Excited, she thinks about inviting Shintaro to watch it with her. Thinking about it, she plans to surprise him at work and invite the boy, and just thinking about this date together, Noel is already very happy. The next day, she goes to the restaurant and leaves the boss happy, thinking that the employee likes the place so much that she even frequents it as a customer. She ignores the boss and rushes to Shintaro as soon as he passes by, but soon realizes she's not the only girl present because of him. Toa had been invited by him. Lily found out that Shintaro worked parked there and decided to drag Hisui along. Finally, Tsumugi makes the excuse that it was hot and decided to come in for a drink. Watching the scene, the boss praises the brightness of young Shintaro's soul, wondering how many girls at the same time are capable of courting this handsome lad. So even in front of all the girls, Noel moves on and invites her friend to see the movie with her, but the waiter will have to cover for someone who missed work and will only be able to leave at 6 in the evening while the movie is at 3:30 and it's the last session. Because of this, the girl starts to emanate a light snowstorm while Lily asks Hisui if this movie is based on the book she read. The girl replies yes until everyone at the table concludes they want to watch and decide to go together. In the meantime, Toa was clueless because she thought going to the movies was the same as literally entering the movie. When they explain to her what it is, she gets excited to join the group, while Noel can't explain that she wants to go just with Shintaro, so she ends up going along. As they head to the movie, she regrets not being able to express herself and Toa wants to know how to behave in the cinema. Lily warns her to stay quiet the whole time and Tsumugi comments that rule number 1 is to go to the bathroom before the movie starts. Hisui remembers that they tell you what you can or can't do at the beginning, so the angel just needs to pay attention to that. While everyone was chatting, Noel thinks she could interact if Shintaro were there too, until Toa draws the girl's attention and tells her she's excited for this outing. Inside the mall, Toa and Lily eat some churros and Tsumugi asks Noel if she's up for splitting a tub of popcorn because it's too big for one person. Embarrassed, she accepts, and then everyone goes to the session that just started. When the lights go out, Toa takes Noel's hand because she's scared and the snow woman is embarrassed by that. Finally, the movie, The Ghost Girl and the Mysterious Staircase, begins where in the middle of the film, the protagonist gets startled when he sees a black cat beckoning him to a mansion. Upon reaching the door, the boy realizes it's the house rumored to be haunted, but still he proceeds after seeing the cat entering the mansion. At the entrance, he notices a grand staircase with a window at the back basking in the late afternoon sun. As he ascends the stairs, night suddenly falls, revealing a ghost emerging through the window. Still unsure how to act, Noel gathers the courage to grab some popcorn, which she's sharing with her friend. At that moment, a massive explosion rocks the house, prompting the boy in the movie to grab the apparition's hand and carry her outside, leaving all the girls tense at the climax of the plot. Soon the movie ends and Toa emphasizes how much better it is to watch a movie on this giant screen that goes boom when something explodes. Moreover, the story is excellent. Deep down, Noel agrees that it was a great movie, which is why she really wished Shintaro had been there. Speaking of which, Lily suggests that when the movie becomes available on a streaming service, they should watch it with Shintaro in the club room, and everyone supports the idea simultaneously. Then they plan to meet him at Starbucks after his work. With that settled, as the girls discuss the movie's parts, Noel can't stop thinking about Shintaro, lamenting that she'll have to wait another hour to see him. Having read the book, Hisui thinks the movie skipped many parts but managed the narrative structure it chose quite well. However, in the book, the protagonist has an older sister, and in the movie, the cat ended up taking many lines that were originally hers. Hearing this, Noel also felt like the cat was talking too much, so she mentions the example of the tanning salon scene. Hisui confirms that those lines should have been the sisters. Then the Yuki Anna starts to join the conversation after isolating herself during the whole outing. Soon all the girls are animatedly discussing the movie, making Noel realize she can have fun even without Shintaro around. Afterwards, the girls thank Noel for suggesting the cinema, as they probably wouldn't have had this moment together otherwise, especially to see such a good movie. Reflecting on this, Noel feels ashamed of herself because she felt jealous of Shintaro's friends earlier and acted indifferent all afternoon. Wanting to change this behavior, she thanks everyone for accompanying her to the cinema, even though they're not her friends. With that said, the girls sour instantly because they were sure Izumi considered them all friends. Noel points out that they're actually Shintaro's friends, so Tsumugi explains that you can be friends with more than one person at the same time. Having no social tact, Noel has a basic freakout and seems not to understand this concept, saying she didn't ask anyone to be her friend. Tsumugi explains that it's not something you ask for and that everyone there is friends with each other with or without Shintaro. Thus, they're all friends of Noel. Hearing this, the Yuki Anna can't contain her emotion, so she runs while crying with happiness, as if she had fulfilled a dream that according to her Shintaro was mainly responsible for coming true. because without him she probably wouldn't know the others. But at the same time she wonders if everyone is friends with Shintaro the same way she is, because that doesn't seem right, as she gets very happy when she thinks about him, although she doesn't know exactly why that brings her joy. Suddenly, the boy himself appears in front of the girl, asking where the others are. He notices Noel is crying, but she pretends it's nothing. Reflecting on her friend, the girl discovers that he's indeed more special to her than just a friend. So she gathers the courage to tell Shintaro that she doesn't just see him as a friend, and after a brief dramatic pause, she considers that he's actually her best friend. However, before hearing a response, the other girls arrive, distracting the boy. In the meantime, still confused, Noel Izumi wonders if it's right to consider him her best friend. As night falls, Shintaro's house air conditioner ended up breaking on an insanely hot day, so he and Toa use the bathtub to cool off. Since the guy wouldn't stop complaining, the angel reminds him that the technician will come tomorrow to fix it, and in the meantime, the bathtub can suffice. Still unconvinced, Shintaro plans to go somewhere with air conditioning tomorrow because the heat is really intense. Another thing heating up there is the guy's heart when he sees Toa waving the nightdress to get some air. Hypnotized by the angel's legs, Shintaro manages to regain his composure and decides to fight the temperature in the pleasant and cool night breeze. Hopefully, he opens the balcony door, but it's also scorching outside. Out of nowhere, Lily appears in the apartment to give her usual bite to the friend, but the guy was stinking after spending the whole day without a shower, making the vampire give up. Then Lilishka takes the opportunity to say goodbye to Toa and give an invitation to both of them for the occult club's summer camp. Shintaro remembers they're not even members of that club, which scares the vampire since they're about to miss tomorrow's trip, which will have hot springs and a beach. Anyway, she tells Shintaro to go because she already convinced the other girls that he would, but he makes it clear that's not his problem. With that, she resorts to an extremely annoying tantrum until Shintaro asks if there's air conditioning there. By asking this question, the boy thought he was going to one of those normal summer camps where young people go, but they were about to find themselves in a place they never imagined. Sometime later, in front of a massive building, Shintaro and Toa look up at the skyscraper as if it's something from another world, while the angel questions if this is really the meeting point. Shintaro checks the briefing and confirms that it is. Suddenly, a policewoman approaches them, calling them by name and asking them to follow her. Without knowing what's happening, they go with the woman and end up inside a helicopter along with the other girls from the group. Once there, Tsurumi Hisui greets her friends and informs them that staff will take their luggage to the summer house. The group is terrified after getting off the helicopter, as no one was prepared for this experience. Tsumugi asks who this girl is until she notices the helicopter has her family's name on it. Tsurumi's family is one of the 4 largest conglomerates in Japan. Lilishka adds that she had already mentioned this before when she explained that Hisui's grandfather is the head of the Kappa Federation of Japan, which runs the country from behind the scenes. Soon, 2 of Hisui's personal maids welcome the visitors, stating that they descend from a long line of elite Kappas who have served the Tsurumi clan heirs for generations. The girl with green hair is named Kujaku, while the one with blue hair is called Aoi. By the way, in case anyone hadn't noticed, the 2 are twins. They then continue the tour inside the summer house, and the guests pass through a hallway filled with maids. Tsumugi comments that this place is enormous, but Aoi insists that this is the smallest of the clan's houses. A little further on, everyone is enchanted by a lake, which Kujaku claims was built during the Edo period by family members. After all, Kappas are water gods, and at that time the Tsurumi clan used their irrigation expertise to gain a prestigious position in the shogunate. However, there is a sad legend behind this lake. Aoi tells them that a long time ago 2 lovers tried to exchange their shirikadama for love and to meet the creator. They say that if 2 people profess their love at the lake's edge, they will be together forever. Innocently, Shintaro asks what a shirikadama is, making the maids embarrassed to answer. They soften the explanation by saying it is a precious part of the body located in a well-known place, if you get what they mean. Then the twins leave the guests in their rooms. Without delay, Lilishka announces the start of the occult club's summer camp, informing them that everyone will participate in an important event after dinner. Until then, everyone is free to do as they please. Confused, they realize it's not even lunchtime yet and think it might be good to plan something as a group since no one knows this place. However, Lilishka didn't bother to plan anything like that. In this case, the twin maids step in to create activities for the visitors, inviting them to a sumo match in the clan's official ring. Kujaku steps forward to face the first opponent, but no one volunteers. Then the maid explains that kappas have loved sumo since ancient times, and this love is within the soul of their species, just like cucumbers. Anyway, the group decides to leave this opportunity for later, so Kujaku invites everyone to visit a beautiful nearby beach and offers swimsuits if needed. Excited, Tsumugi and Noel rush to find their pieces until Shintaro notices he's floating in front of the girls and asks the maid where the men's swimsuits are. However, upon discovering that Shintaro is a man, all the housemaids become agitated and surround him as if he were some exotic alien. Later at the beach, Shintaro managed to get a pair of trunks from one of the women's sets, so he was fine. Talking about what had just happened at the house, he wonders if he doesn't have features and a build that clearly indicate he is a man. Kujaku admits she was hasty, thinking he was one of those rich girls raised as a boy. Moreover, she finds it impressive that Miss Hisui has finally befriended a man, which always seemed impossible. Kujaku further states that the girl will soon become the #1 kappa in Japan, and to obtain the shirikodama of her destined person, she needs to remain pure. Seeking this purity, Hisui was raised surrounded only by women, but now it seems there is a boy in her life. Speaking of which, Shintaro asks if he can really stay there after all. Suddenly, Toa arrives, showing off her physique along with Noel and Tsumugi, who is a bit more restrained in her appearance. Lastly, Hisui is the most modest of all. Tsumugi freaks out, saying if she knew they were going to the beach with Shintaro, she would have dieted. Noel, who isn't bothered by her outfit, invites the boy to play volleyball, but he declines, saying he'll grill some meat for everyone, while wondering how he'll deal with all these girls around. Lalishka surprises him from behind, complaining that he's being too shy, showing off her perfect outfit for a vampire on a sunny beach. Noel can't wait any longer and pulls Shintaro by the arm to play volleyball, so everyone joins in to enjoy the beach together. In no time, Shintaro has prepared the first batch of meat, which Toa skewers to share with everyone. The boy makes a point of separating the angel's portion and handing it to her, leaving her embarrassed, while Noel comments that it was funny seeing her reaction when they arrived to see the sea. Toa was captivated by the infinite view of the ocean, and having heard its salt water, wondered how many bags of salt were thrown in there. While roasting corn, the young man offers some to Tsurumi, who gets startled just hearing a male voice. Seeing this, he feels he needs to break the ice between them somehow, so he asks if he can call her by her first name, Hisui. In response, the girl almost combusts, looking like she's going to explode. Shintaro tries to backtrack, but she pushes forward and allows him to call her that. Relieved, the young man finally hands the corn to Hisui, who runs off to tell Lalishka that no boy had ever called her by her first name before, which made her nervous. A little later, Shintaro is casually drinking his water when Toa arrives with her angelic charm to sit next to him. His first reaction is to offer her a glass of water in the strong heat, while the angel comments that she never imagined the sea could be so beautiful with the humidity, the breeze, and the salty smell in the air, not to mention the feeling of walking barefoot on the sand. She had heard about the sea, but experiencing it live is entirely different. Despite everything, she feels embarrassed wearing a bikini, as it feels like she's only in her underwear. During the sunset, all the friends lie side by side on the sand to celebrate the fantastic day they've had together, when the twin maids reappear to call everyone for a bath in the hot springs before dinner. However, since the summer house only has female bathing areas, Shintaro is invited to clean himself in the backyard well. Alternatively, he can bathe at different times than the girls, like after dinner. Tsumugi laments that her friend is isolated in this, but Noel asks what time he plans to peek at them. Shintaro is offended that she would even think he'd do such a thing, and she realizes it's her imagination again creating scenarios as if they were normal in real life. After bathing in the well, the young man finds it not so bad after all. Then Lalishka appears in her swimsuit, which she had been wearing underneath the whole time just to show off her outfit, leaving him wondering why on earth she showed up out of nowhere just for that. Meanwhile, Toa notices the different texture of the hot spring water, and the girls explain it's good for health. The angel notes the spring is named after Hisui, so Lily explains that the Kappa leader created this spring thinking about Hisui's first bath. Despite everyone enjoying it, Noel, being a Yuki Anna, has her blood pressure drop significantly in high temperatures. Red as a shrimp and covered in burns, she is warned to get out of the spring, while fantasizing that it would be nice to have Shintaro Shintaro bathing there with them. Tsumugi imagines the scene and panics just at the thought, while the vampire of the group advises everyone to wash their hair quickly in this water, or it will become dry and frizzy due to the salt and ultraviolet rays. Ignoring this conversation, Tsumugi is looking at Toa's balloons, feeling bad that hers aren't the same size. Noel asks what's wrong with her, and she feels even worse seeing that Noel's chest is also much larger. Noticing Tsumugi staring at her melons, Izumi asks if she wants to touch them, as this is an ancient tradition. Realizing what's going on in Tsumugi's mind, Lalishka reassures Hisui that she doesn't need to worry about size as hers will grow in time, and even if they don't grow much, small things can also have big dreams. Since she was out of the loop, Hisui doesn't understand what her friend is trying to say. Suddenly, Toa notices a snowflake on her shoulder, and they all see Noel tired of not understanding how things in the world work, which changes her mood and starts to affect the temperature. Desperate, she questions if at least her friends are real, and Tsumugi tries to convince her there's nothing fictitious about this. Meanwhile, Shintaro is waiting for the girls, who are taking a long time to return, when the twins show up, deciding to ignore the fact he's a man so he can sleep there, since it's been a long time since they've seen Hisui have so much fun. However, if anything happens to the girl, they have their cucumbers ready to handle the situation. Soon everyone gathers again for dinner, and after the meal they feel sleepy, so they decide to sleep. Once again, Shintaro is sidelined in the summer house for being a boy. Upset by this, he remembers he can at least go to the hot spring after dinner, so he doesn't waste time and heads for his second bath of the day. However, Hisui is already there, and they bump into each other, leading to the expected shouting, but she makes it clear he doesn't need to leave as she can go to the other side. With that settled, Shintaro fears the twins seeing this scene, but Hisui praises him, saying how much his presence brings joy to everyone around, including Lalishka. Knowing how much Hisui likes the vampire, he asks if she joined the school because of Lily, but she actually received a prophecy back in middle school. One day, Hisui saved a lady from drowning, and the lady revealed that the Kappa should place herself in an environment with men to open a new world for her. Since Kappas take water-related prophecies very seriously, Hisui gave up going to an all-girls school. She struggled to adapt to high school until she finally met Shintaro, and the girls and everything changed for the better. Happy with these words, Shintaro heads back to his bed, but on the way the twins force him to wrestle as he broke his promise.